If he now took that entire sum of money and invested it into Carnival Cruise Lines stock, he would be getting paid a dividend of about 4% on his money, which means he's going to be taking home about $366 per month in extra cash flow doing nothing. This doesn't even consider the fact that Carnival Cruise Line stock can go up. I guess it could also go down, but he's getting the dividend, okay? Now, in order to see if Mark can be financially independent by investing his $850,000 the way I've outlined in this video, we have to be able to compare him to other people. So let's stack up what we've got so far and then see what year in wealth by owning real estate. Now, Mark does also have the Carnival stock. Let's assume Carnival goes up by just, say, 2% per year, or around his retirement account investment and from his Carnival stock investment, which actually puts the money he's generating at over twice the median income every single year. And I am back from my Disney cruise. Somebody thought that I was on a Carnival cruise, which I've got nothing against Carnival. In fact, their stock is a really hot dividend stock right now. I think it yields like over 5%. It's crazy, but I wanted to come clean about something today. See,
down massively. You have Norwegian Cruise Line, Royal Caribbean, and Carnival Cruise Line. Probably not a stock or industry I'm going to invest in personally, but it is an area that has sold off massively, and the reasons are pretty simple, guys. There was a virus outbreak on a major cruise line, and as a result, pretty much every one of these cruise lines has canceled cruises that were bound for Asia, similar trading range as Norwegian Cruise Lines. And then finally, we have Carnival Cruise Lines here down 14% today, and over the last 6 months, they are down 28.04%.
The actual impacts, like, oh crap, companies are going bankrupt, like Carnival and the airlines are filing bankruptcy, and all of a sudden we've got the debt holiday coming in because people can't make their mortgage payments.
Buy the risky stuff, because the risky stuff is what's cratering. It's the Carnival Cruises of the world. It's the Cedar Fairs. It's the oil stocks. And I've mentioned this already in prior videos. My strategy is the ride or die stocks. The reason for that strategy is to safeguard myself. The reason for that strategy also is to just buy quality. If stuff's every
curiosity sake, since I talk about Carnival Cruise, let me see how bad is it. Oh my freaking god. You see
in the last few weeks. These three stocks are the Carnival Corporation, or Carnival Cruise Line as some people know them. And then we are going to be taking a look at Norwegian Cruise Line and Royal Caribbean Cruise Line right here. And the ticker is CCL. And we can see that it is down almost 14% today alone. And if we look at a one-year chart, we can see that on January 13th, the stock was worth $51.90. And now it is all the way down to $12.56. And for that, I have a spreadsheet. So let me just pull that up. And CCL is Carnival Cruise Lines. NCLH is the Norwegian Cruise Line, and RCL is Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, 78.6%. NCLH's high was 59.7%.
More of a consistent dividend than a crazy stock like Carnival Cruise Lines, which I do have a little bit of a position in now recently, but I definitely protected that with some options, which I'm going to be talking about, you know, in our Discord more later. But wow. Dump some money into some really speculative stocks right now, like Boeing or Carnival Cruise Lines or Darden's Restaurants or Simon Property Group. You know, some of these are so heavily oversold that there is a potential you could put your money into a company like, you know, the Olive Garden chain or Carnival Cruise Line, and you could see a dramatic bump in values. Or they'll just go bankrupt. Not just about this outbreak, but what the outbreak is going to do.
For every comment I've been getting lately on doing a video on Carnival Cruise Line, I would probably have enough money to like buy my own cruise ship. I don't know. Like, it's been ridiculous. So many comments from so many people about CCL. It's like every minute we're going to talk about it. So let's first start out by looking at Carnival's stock price. It fell about $27 a share today, up about 16%. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong stock. Carnival Cruise Line here today fell about another 9.5%, okay? 9.5%. It's under $8 a share. Under $8 a share, $7.97. Pretty much the only situation that could have ever got this stock price to this price is the Roni situation. Literally, this is the only thing. Like if they had a that's just facts, okay? So let's go ahead and look at the stock chart of Carnival Cruise Line for the last 3 months. And you're gonna see it was a $40, $50 stock. It was smooth sailing. No sitting around in cash is plenty. It's plenty. But unless a situation happens where your business goes to zero overnight, a super unrealistic scenario that never ever happens. Let's imagine a horrible year for Carnival Cruise Line in 2020. Just a disaster where they're like, what happened to you guys, okay? A horrible year for Carnival Cruise Line would be like them putting up like $14 billion in revenue and doing like $1.5 billion of net income. That would be a disaster. It would come as a surprise to me because I always thought if, you know, in this situation over the last couple months, that Carnival could get through it based upon raising some money. And since they weren't going to get the bailout money, well, they're going to have to probably raise some money. I mean, the airlines, they're obviously getting bailout money because like this raise too much money versus not enough money. Because what happens if cruises aren't allowed to operate in a month from now or 2 months from now? And obviously with Carnival, there's a lack of demand for the stock as it is, right? It was bouncing back a bit last week, and now you put a bunch more shares out there. It's going to create even a bigger lack of demand for your stock. More shares out there. You want to do something like Tesla did. Elon Musk, the best money raiser in the history of mankind, right? Elon Musk. Stock do I have? I have over 2,600 shares of Carnival Cruise Line stock. So a little different with Carnival Cruise Line because there's the risk of bankruptcy, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. There is that risk. I wouldn't even put another one of my companies at a 10% chance of going bankrupt through this. You know,
that Jeremy from Financial Education put out doing an analysis on Carnival Cruise Line stock, and that video absolutely blew up. And so that got me thinking, and I realized there's a lot of stocks out there that have fallen massively in the last month or so, and I think a lot of people are wondering whether or not this is a buying opportunity.
Hot bounce back stocks like Boeing or Carnival. And I could watch those lose another 50% in value, but I'm sure they will 10x their valuation very soon. Or they won't. But today, this video is about Tesla and the latest current report. So let's get into that.
Things like that. And here we are today, just a few days later, right? And Carnival Cruise Line's trading at $10 plus a share. It's made a big upward move. Like that's a gargantuan upward move in literally just a few days. Like that's incredible, right? And keep in mind, 2 of those days was the weekend when the stock literally half the volume of Carnival Cruise Line. That just shows you how volatile a stock like Carnival Cruise Line is today. Absolutely incredible. Now to push a stock up 20+% without some more major news. And there's 2 more things, okay? Number 2 reason the stock is up huge today is the Saudi fund takes a minority stake in Carnival. 2% stake, that's a pretty dang big stake, in Carnival Corporation, according to a Monday financial filing from the cruise giant. For all you guys that are involved in the stock market and actually, you know, take investing serious and actually, you know, stock pick and things like that, if you ever think about the 2 things that can move a stock huge, there are really only 2 things for the most. First 2 reasons why the stock is up huge. Reason number 3 why Carnival Cruise Line is having a great day today, why stocks make a massive move up, is what we call new buyers, old buyers.
And this has been researched. It's not just me speculating. Millennials are more interested in cruising. Seniors are more interested in cruising. I know things are going to evolve, and it's going to be interesting to see how things change and society changes.
Very cautious and understand this is strictly a growth play, much like I'm making with Carnival. I know there's a risk that Carnival could go under, so click this video right here to get my details on my strategy for buying stocks.
Alone, Cheesecake Factory, almost 10%. Carnival, 10%. Wells Fargo, almost up 10%, with JP Morgan up 6% in the lead behind. Wow. 19 made $1.7 billion net dollars left over. Royal Caribbean made $1.7 billion. $3 billion for Carnival. That's almost twice as much as Royal Caribbean. Here's Royal Caribbean's 1.7, Southwest 2.2 billion, 355 million for Spirit, and American at 1.2 billion in debt. Southwest Airlines 16.1 billion in debt, Spirit 4.8 billion in debt, and American a shocking 41.8 billion in debt. Okay, this it's between companies because it gets a little shocking, okay? Carnival Cruise Lines would need 3.5 years to pay off their current debt, including the $6 billion that they just borrowed, or 9.6 years to pay off all of their debt. The companies that stand out to me are Carnival Cruise Lines and Delta, which we know Delta is where Warren Buffett invested, and we also know that Warren Buffett invested over here at Southwest.
Following. 2 shares of Carnival at $12 a piece, 1 share of Delta at $24 a piece, 1 share of Uber at $27, and 1 share of Bank of America at $25. And if you want a little less risk in your portfolio, I would trade out the shares of Carnival and Delta for 1 share of Coca-Cola. Ultimately, just keep in mind, when you're using fractional shares, you really can put together a portfolio of any mix of stocks you want.
Okay. So now CCL, Carnival Corporation, okay? This is, now we're getting into the trouble stocks. These next 3 are what I call the trouble stocks of the account, okay?
Cruise line industry has been ravaged by this COVID-19 pandemic. Carnival, Royal Caribbean, and Norwegian Cruise Lines have all been shut down by the CDC, meaning no cruises are allowed from US ports for 100 days. Now, this timeline might be a little bit shorter if the pandemic goes away before that, but for right now, the CDC has said, guys, no cruises for 100 days. As a result, there's today. As of today, Carnival's stock price is at $11.85 per share. Now, if you rewind just a couple months back to January and February, you'll see that their stock price hit the 50s. The current long-term debt that these 3 companies have taken. You can definitely see that their debt has spending billions and billions of dollars on new ships this year. For example, Carnival has $14.5 billion in new ship commitments. Royal Caribbean has $13.9 billion.
About Carnival Cruise Line, and I was like, oh, Carnival Cruise Line, they should start using it for oil storage, okay? That's how they could start making money, because obviously, if you don't know, Carnival Cruise Line is the worst investment I've ever been in my life. We'll see how it turns out over the next few years, but obviously they got hit by the once in a 100-year Rooney situation, and so
grow as fast as some of these other speculative stocks, such as Carnival or Delta. I think those have a lot of upside, but those
Carnival Cruise Line stock as a buy right now, trading at around $15 per share. Now, Carnival Cruise Line stock has been a very nasty ride for many investors. In their creditworthiness, they were considered to be a relatively sound investment opportunity. Now, as far as the worst possible thing that could ever happen to Carnival Cruise Line, and something they never prepared for. In Miami, Florida, but numerous ships actually fly under the Panama flag and are registered in this country. And according to a 2015 report from the Cruise Lines International Association, it said that 90% of cruise line commercial vessels that are taking bailout from the US government, and it's very unlikely in the future. However, Carnival Cruise Line did benefit indirectly from a different type of bailout that the government is doing, and I did a full video on this about a week ago talking about why the stock market is rigged right now. I'll put that video up in the corner if you guys want to check it out at the end, but essentially ever in the form of corporate junk bonds. And essentially, a company like Carnival Cruise Lines has benefited from this purchasing of junk bonds because this is their way to raise capital at a time like this. And everyone had to quarantine. We can say for sure those people on that cruise ship will probably never sail again, and they have, I'm sure, told all of their friends and family about the horrors. And so people have a
realistic. And so if you have these hopes that, oh yeah, Carnival Cruise Line is going to bring back their dividend this year, dream on, okay? Dream.
Large stock moves that I was making between companies like Delta, Carnival, the Simon Property Group, Tesla, Amazon, and some other moves and pricing targets, which I definitely encourage you to watch that live stream if you're a course member. Check it out. It's there, and if you join now, you'll also see it. But for now, what I really want to do is talk about the Federal Reserve, what we
is strictly a speculative growth play, much like I'm making with Carnival Cruise Lines right now. Not that Carnival's a growth play, they're just speculative for now. as I know there is risk that Carnival could go completely under and file bankruptcy, so I may lose all my money right there. So it's not.
Like I bought some of these too, you know, the Delta, the Carnival, the Simon Property Group, and you're kind of floating around at the bottom. Like there hasn't been a big move up, right?
We're up so much on it, up 259%.
Or bet over a company like Norwegian or Carnival, which might not have the ability to spend more money on the cleaning that Walt Disney might. Totally speculative, but we know that companies which are like Macy's, Dave & Buster's, Carnival, Delta, Cheesecake Factory, Norwegian Cruise Lines, AMC, Cinemark, the Simon Property Group, right? And it seems like every day we kind of have this teeter-totter going on. Well,
It's not really like something I gotta go buy Carnival, but it's at the same time I'm not selling Carnival. Like I'm just like I'll just hold it. You know?
That's the easiest way to do it. Well then, hey, you know what? There's no
Invest because a coworker made 22% on his Carnival stock position on Friday alone, like I did. And yes, I think it's utterly ridiculous. There is no reason for it fundamentally, technically, or even in the news cycle. Nothing.
Property Group basically double from my cost basis, sure. Carnival and Delta double from cost basis, sure, fine. But I'd moved my Delta and Carnival into Simon Property Group, so no big difference. You know, Chase went up, what, maybe 30% or something like that. So this kind of shows you that the portfolio had some really big winners and some average winners.
Since that day, 211%. So Royal Caribbean leads the pack in percentage win since March 20th. So we're going to focus on them because they had the highest rate of return at 211%.
Busters, the Simon Property Group, the airlines, Uber, Cheesecake Factory, Wynn Hotels, Starbucks, all between 8 and 15% off. Heck, you want something more safe? Here's JP Morgan Chase and Disney for you. And if you like to see what some of my favorite stocks, geez, even Redfin's down almost 6% today.
No, I'm not buying, I'm not selling. Now contrast that with my Carnival position. I will be taking profits from that position. I think that we'll make it out and, you know, probably a year, actually probably 2 years. I would rather sell some of my Carnival position to cover my cost and then put that money towards assets because it is not one of my long-term holds. There really isn't a lot of emotion in my hours trading leading into Friday. I decided to sell about 60% of my Carnival position at $20.10 per share.
Think about it this way. When Carnival Cruise Lines needed money, they had to go to the public bond market, and Carnival Cruise Lines was seen as basically a bankruptcy risk and a junk bond risk. They had to pay like 11% on their corporate bonds, which is rather than a company like Cheesecake Factory having to borrow money like Carnival Cruise Lines at 11% or some rip-off loan, this stimulus money, this Federal Reserve stimulus money, will give companies like the Cheesecake Factory cheap loans as cheap as 3 to 4% interest with
Okay, we're talking about two different ship companies. One, Carnival Cruise Line, CCL stock. We're talking about NAT stock, Nordic American Tanker, and oil tanker company. We're talking about both these stocks. Let's get it done. Let's get it talking about it, okay? I've seen so many comments like this. Please talk about CCL. Please talk about NAT. I mean, every day in months, it's crazy. So losses are enormous at Carnival Cruise Line right now. Carnival Cruise Line also announced they want to sell about a half dozen of their older cruise ships. This news just came out about 2 days ago. Royal Caribbean, Carnival Cruise Line, and all the different players out there, they all basically said that they're not going to cruise until at least October. Okay, so now we're looking at least October until these guys are ready to get up and cruising. Second quarter 2020 Carnival Cruise Line CCL stock ended with $7.6 billion of available liquidity, and the company expects to further enhance future liquidity, including through refinancing scheduled debt maturities. Right before Roni Rona took off, actually just went to Carnival Cruise Line's business, but right now, man, it is really, really cheap, okay? Now, in terms of
sister companies and stuff like that. You know, Carnival's another one that's a sister company as well with like Dave & Buster's, for example. But I also put some of my portfolio into Dave & Buster's, and all in all, I had somewhere around 15% at the end of May of my portfolio in Dave & Buster's and the Simon Property Group. That Delta Airlines, the Simon Property Group, Carnival, the Cheesecake Factory, Dave & Buster's, and companies like this. Mostly Carnival, Delta, and the Simon Property Group, right? My plan was I would stop buying real estate for 2 months. I would buy these recovery stocks with about 10 to 15% of my portfolio, along with my favorites for the rest. And once these stocks rebounded in a V shape that we were going to have, I would sell and buy more real estate, and everything is awesome. Simon.
Out there. 2021 demand is extremely high. And like I said, it's not just for Carnival. If you look at what the other guys have said out there.
Places we go, and of course, our Carnival family, our shipboard and shoreside personnel. So, you know, the interests of public health is always in the forefront for us. And how do we get people back on ships? When there's social gathering and society has developed the compensating measures that it's comfortable with, that
Price of a lot of these losers for now, kind of like Carnival Cruise Line, which is the first one that pops in my head. It's still a little frothy at the 14, 15, 16.
Favor to an extent, you know, United Airlines, for example, Carnival, some of these really badly beaten down, you know, pandemic-related stocks. There's got to be a great deal of volatility as we get volatility in the opening up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have a lot of uncertainties. Number one,
individual names rise today, guys.
Yeah, the Carnivals.
Carnival Cruise was up 5%, 5 below. You had actually a lot of apparel makers, a lot of energy companies. So there's a sense here that while a lot did get sold off, there was money still seeking a home within the equity market.
Yeah, let me bring in our guest, Diane Jaffe, of course, who's still. What do you make of a day like this? And Romain is right. Carnival Cruise Lines, Norwegian, those are some of the best performers in the S&P 500. So there still is a sense of optimism, perhaps, around the reopening trade, if you will, and cross-asset. You're not getting the certain signals that
here in today's movers, Ralph Lauren, as you said, Carnival, Royal Caribbean, and some of the energy stocks. And we saw the CEO of Baker buy 1 million shares in the open market just the other day. So I think that the reopen, that's the virus, of course, is the gating factor. There's a huge amount of liquidity.
Recovery stocks. Carnival Cruise Lines, Delta, Dave & Buster's, Simon, whatever. Get at least 5 to 10 of these.
Carnival Cruise Line, all up today, okay? Just to fry everybody's brain a little bit more if everybody wasn't confused enough about this whole situation.
Delta Airlines has so much debt. Fortunately, some of it was given to them via government bailout because you know, we get all this volatility all the time. Yay, Delta Airlines. Yay, Carnival Cruise Lines. Oh, Delta. Oh, Carnival. All right, we get all that.
Ticker CCL. This one I do hold in the public account. And oh my goodness, has it been bad, okay? Down almost $43,000 on this stock, down 53.73%.
Oh, it's so juicy.
So the first stock I sold completely out of would be Carnival Cruise Line. Now this was a house money trade for me. I bought it way back when at about $12 per share and sold a chunk at around $20 or so.
Well, I mean, if we think about it, it makes sense that Delta and Carnival Cruise Lines and Wynn look cheap when there's a huge risk of these companies being saddled with debt for 2 to 3 years to come or more. We have no idea when this pandemic's going to end at this point.
Or so. And I still had some left, which I sold at $14 per share recently. All the rest of the stocks in my portfolio are ride or die type stocks. I also made sure my cash
and travel. Norwegian Cruise Lines and Carnival Cruise Lines are both down almost 10% today.
Watch these stocks, okay? RCL, Norwegian Cruise Line, and Carnival. I think these are interesting stocks to watch. You might not.
It's like American Airlines, Delta Airlines, Royal Caribbean, Carnival Cruise Lines, United Airlines, AMC Entertainment, Cinemark, Dave & Buster's. These are some biggest movers in the positive direction. And of course, Pfizer is up too, as well as other pharmaceutical stocks. For example, Johnson &
including 60% for AMC, 63% for Cinemark, 46% for Dave & Buster's, 36% for Carnival, 29% Now's the time to do it. I also added Delta and Carnival at just 1% each. This now pushes my recovery holdings to a total of 7% in my portfolio. I've also moved Twitter down to 1% as user growth is really concerning. Although I have to say, I've really been enjoying Twitter during this pandemic.
Like the American Airlines of this world, the Boeings, the Carnivals, the Expedias, they've significantly underperformed. However, on a day like today, they are where your winning trade has been, up about 10%, whereas you're basically only up about 1 or 2% on those that have a better balance sheet in your orange line.
$1.5 billion of stock. Carnival is following up on a previous round of share sales. The cruise industry remains essentially on hold due to the coronavirus pandemic. Carnival shares were down 64% for the year before today's open. And American Airlines also pricing an offering of about $500 million in common stock. Again, briefly, American Airlines, Carnival, some of the few reopening trade stocks that are taking advantage of yesterday's big rally, cashing in, raising some equity. American selling $500 million in stock, helped to shore up that balance sheet, along with Carnival as well, looking at more than $1 billion. So those shares lower, of course, a little bit on that announcement. And finally, I want to flip up the board. And Michael, I'd love to bring you back into this conversation. I'm showing a board here, frankly, of record low yields on high yield bonds, and we'll
way off that number for quite a while. Or heck, maybe yesterday, after Carnival Cruise Lines ran up on the hopium of a vaccine, you decided, you know what, I'm going to add a little bit of Carnival to my portfolio. If you put all of your $10,000 into Carnival today, you would have lost $1,300.
Points out, hasn't harmed the appetite for debt. Carnival issuing some debt today, $11 billion in orders coming through, Jeff. We've been trying to measure, balance out the short-term headwinds with the long-term tailwind that's developing right now. How do you navigate those waters at the moment, Jeff, with the team at BlackRock?
Yeah, I mean, we are trying to help right now. We saw Carnival Cruise operate, the Carnival Cruise folks do a big bond sale today, getting $11 billion for $2 billion worth of issuance. So on the one hand, you know, Mnuchin is right that for now the market doesn't need it, but he's come out since.
Is the interest rate they were offering. Carnival Cruise Lines, for example, was like, hey, y'all, we need some money. And everybody's like, y'all sinking. So Carnival
loose. And last week on Friday, to see that Carnival offering come to market the way it did, to see Inspire Brands come to the loan market the way it did, Eric, does that keep you in a constructive mood when you see the primary market doing so well?
Yes, no, I think that's a great question that, you know,
yeah, you gotta buy new planes too at some point. And when you buy Carnival Cruise Lines, you are buying a slice of 87 ships that are rotting in the ocean right now with 120,000 employees.
Those are 2/3, 75% of names like Carnival Cruise. It's kind of Royal Caribbean. It's absurd to me. And so for me, it's an opportunity. You know, we've both spoke, or you've all spoke about pension funds and core holdings. It's an opportunity for you to add juice to your portfolio because.
They were declaring, hey, we're going all into Carnival, you know, and I mean, what's Carnival at now? Let's see, CCL. I was about to type CCIV too. I mean, they've easily doubled their money on Carnival since their investment. Look at this. That's interesting. Why? The recovery stock Carnival only ended up 5.61% today and is now up. It is now actually down 3.4% in the after hours. Really interesting. Here on Carnival Cruise Line, we have substantially more. I mean, well, we got strong open volume here at the last trading day here, but nice sustained movement here. Plummeting on news of basically not getting the USPS contract. Tilray, Cost, Cinemark, Carnival. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, there's just recovery here. Airbnb moving up. See how
they're soaking up capital, and that slows down innovation because the natural process of capitalism, which is like forest fires in nature. You clear out the dead wood in order for new growth to emerge, isn't happening.
All four major. Just go over here and just CCL. Oh, Carnival Cruise Lines. Oh my gosh, so many CCs. Carnival, I don't want to touch this. Zoom, thank you. Weston 88 freaking nails it. I mean, that's what I would do. If I was Carnival and half my ship was underwater and you drove up and latched your dinghy to my ship, I'd be like, here, hold some of my water. I know that's not like a perfect example here, but that's kind of... yeah, I'm not going to do an analysis on Coinbase until we actually get closer to Coinbase happening. And then maybe...
These are the catch-up stocks. So take a look at your Carnival Corp, your cruise lines, also IAG and United Airlines, both your airlines here and in Europe. And then TUI up 33%, the tourism company. So big
repeat cruisers in our world and of Carnival and our 9 world-leading brands. And there's pent-up demand. They cruise on average once every 2 years. And so there's a whole year of repeat cruises, basically, that haven't been able to cruise. And so there's plenty of pent-up demand.
Oh my gosh, the prices are so cheap. Oh my gosh, we have 50 seconds to... Nikola, get that out of here. Come on, man. Really? Nikola over Peloton and Carnival and Beyond Meat? And CRISPR? Come on. I mean, Simon Property Group, okay, fine. Etsy, oh my gosh, Etsy should be at least 2 to 3x Simon Property Group. Get out of town. Enphase. Start with the green. So we got Carnival up again, about 2.7%.
Cruise line or the hotel chains. Any company that's going to benefit from people going outside is doing really good right now. That is the trade. They don't care about the businesses. They don't
expect a lot more of these recovery companies to do this, by the way. Carnival Cruise Lines should do this. Dave & Buster's should do this. Honestly, they should all do this. Virgin Galactic down 4.29%. Wow, it's at $29. Man, this thing shot up to like $64. That's crazy cheap. You got Northern Genesis kind of bouncing around, being down red on the open. FRX going red on the open. Carnival probably going to go red on the open, honestly, because they're expecting the same thing to happen with Norwegian Cruise Line. Your courses are so amazing and way too cheap. It works. These red candlesticks happening here at Carnival. I wonder how the greens are behaving today. CCL is at least fighting. At least it's fighting around this line that we drew, rather than going straight down. BFT at 1282. Wow. Where was keep moving so fast? It's crazy. Oh, and let's throw some Disney in as well. And how about some Carnival Cruise Line? They'll pay off their debt. They'll be okay. We're going to have a travel boom. Don't you want to go traveling after this pandemic where you've been locked up for over a year? Yeah. Favor of really potentially that rotation back to some of these growth companies that are now pretty cheap. Of a mixed day. But then again, the guys that are down over here, you know, we're talking 0.5%. Yeah, that's pretty good. So it's pretty much there. Carnival, even Carnival's doing well. We were joking earlier, we should do like a course members cruise ship where we just buy the whole cruise ship for like 4 days or something like that.
Future investing, and today I want to talk about Carnival Cruise stock and if it still has some room to grow. Currently, because of the sell-off in the market this week, it's currently sitting at about $24.50, a lot lower than its previous high of $29.50 because of the spike of last week. So in this video, I want to talk statistics that have come out from Royal Caribbean and Carnival Cruise talking about how their demand and their bookings are up severely. So for example, with Royal Caribbean Cruise, they said that their bookings are up 30% since the new year.
How historic this stimulus package really is, with special contributor Larry Summers of Harvard and Neil Ferguson of the Hoover Institution.
Potentially, we're doing the 1960s on steroids.
It's now here's Norwegian, not as much as Carnival, but also up here. American Airlines or Carnival Cruise Lines, and I'm like, I'm buying Carnival, and I was buying the crap out of these stocks. They were so freaking cheap. Then I sold most of my recovery stocks with some fat gains and moved them over into tech in the summer and real estate. But man, those were the days, huh? But already running into some resistance.
Unveiled last couple of weeks to varying degrees about how much they want those workers back in the office, but that has big implications for how many cups of coffee.
Here. Oh, it got to 125 for a hot minute. Darn. Canoe, Carnival, 28 bucks at Carnival. Go to the week chart here on Carnival, and what do you get? Kind of that bull. Still some potential, obviously.
I think by the end of the year, you're going to see technology, maybe a little bit of large cap.
Some of these stocks could land. We'll start with Carnival.
Yep.
And
Churchill Capital does not show a sign of a bottom yet. Continuing to fall. Tesla here is not showing a sign of bottom yet. Look at this, 7.5% down. Carnival Cruise Lines, Open Door, Fuel Cell, Sundial, all of these guys, Churchill, all of them 6 to 7% down. ChargePoint, again, bleed.
Travel space, the cruise lines, Carnival, Royal Caribbean, and Norwegian Cruise Line. Take a look, down 6 to 7% on these lockdown fears out of Europe. Also in focus, we're looking at the airlines. United, American, Delta are also down by around 3 to 4% as these shutdown worries.
7.6% on the down here. Carnival's down. Everything's down. As beneficiaries of reopening, including Carnival and TripAdvisor, declined. Inflation stations. UBS calculates problem inflation levels for different stocks. Oh, interesting. So we have
Or is it that you get in on some of the reopening trade when you get a Carnival cruise being beaten up so badly?
Yeah, look, I think the answer is both. The way that I'm describing it to clients right now on my team is that we want to be invested and ladder our portfolio around idea maturation. In the same way.
Okay, an okay start there at Intel. Okay start at Carnival, actually. Let's see what else here. Win. Okay. So some stability still in the recovery sector here. 20 minutes of filming here.
It's about the reopening trades. MGM and Carnival, both stocks up about 20% year to date. And let's start with MGM. Ross, is that your pick? I'm going to say it's your pick here.
It's one of my top picks right now, and I'm adding to the position, even though we bought it a year ago at like $10, $15.
This is the only pick I have that's not profitable, and that's Carnival Cruises. And I think, bottom line is I have a lot of clients that are, baby boomers. They love to cruise, and they're all getting vaccinated, and all they can talk about is getting on that next cruise ship.
You've made a compelling case for Carnival, but I do think there's so many factors globally with cruise liners. So in this matchup, I'm going to go with MGM.
All right, we got our first winner, and that's no upset there. But we're going to get into an interesting matchup here with TrueLeave and Vale. And TrueLeave, one of those weed companies, it's been a tough.
Airlines and the cruise lines. Why would you buy Carnival at $10 and Delta super cheap at $19, $20?
Next up on my list is Carnival Corporation, stock ticker CCL. This is an international cruise company that operates over 100 vessels across 10 cruise line brands, such as the current price of $26.06. So Carnival is another volatile reopening stock because a lot of the sentiment is based on when cruise lines will be allowed to start sailing again. As of right now,
again, and Apple's booming at the same time as Carnival Cruise Lines is booming. Can't we get to this point where government spending is 20% of GDP again?
Well, let me preface by saying prior to the pandemic, government spending was right about 45%, and that's state, local, and federal.
Now we've got travels up here too. Yeah, look, Carnival's up here at 3.5%. Norwegian discuss funding at $4 billion of a value. Carnival threatens to move ships abroad amid CDC obstacles. Okay, so the cruise lines are turning up the pressure on the CDC, essentially. That makes sense. Yeah, look at that. Carnival, Norwegian, and Royal Caribbean jump on CDC comments.
For example, are kind of up there now. They've picked up a lot of that reallocation trade, and unless I'm.
And tell me about Carnival, because I have to say I was pulling together my notes last night, and then I kind of woke up this morning and had to certainly tweak them. Tell me about the CDC now possibly offering to or allowing ships to be out and running by midsummer. Cruise industry. Hey, one thing I got to ask you, Arnold, is how much of Carnival threatening to relocate their ships to other markets outside the United States do you think was the reason for the CDC change? Because it was just a few days ago that they came out, and we're still kind of holding firm. What happened?
Really mixed bag from what the cruise operators have saying. Obviously, Carnival reported earlier this morning. They're sort of going with the idea that they will abide by whatever local regulations are. So there are some cruises that are going that are vaccinated cruises and some that are not abroad. Norwegian had an service metrics over time, and Carnival had mentioned this morning that they were looking to refinance some of the more expensive debt that they acquired or raised at the beginning of the pandemic as rates have fallen since then. So I don't know that there is a fast road back for these single destination kind of itineraries for a while. Now, Carnival is the player that has independent brands for different regions. So if you think about Costa for Italy, AIDA for Germany, and so forth and so on, P&O, Cunard, et cetera. I think they can sort of find those niche markets to get into.
We'll talk about it in a moment. Coming up, Carnival CEO Arnold Donald on the cruise line's big increase in future bookings and when the company could actually begin sailing again. Plus,
all right, let's pull back here. Great summary there. Yeah, I mean, interesting. Just again, the indices just bigger
underwater, but some positive news on the cruise line front sees Carnival, Royal, and Norwegian all in the green. Now, also going to check
of the cruise industry shutdown. Now, we heard from Carnival this week when it came out with earnings that bookings are going up. Carnival actually got upgraded by Credit Suisse this morning to outperform from neutral, saying that the cruises will be likely to restart in mid to late summer. So it's unclear, you know, DeSantis is doing this. Presumably, he hasn't even filed yet. He says they're going to file.
In the major cruise lines here, where you look at Carnival yesterday, Arnold Donald, he said, we want to be viewed more like other travel companies, like airlines. We want to come back to business. That's a change in tone, I would say, relative to the past few months, where a lot of the cruise lines, because they've been forced to, they've followed or they've fallen in line with what the CDC has said. Also, worth mentioning here, Carnival has 14 U.S. ports, and Arnold Donald was noting on that call yesterday that they are open to potentially sailing out of other locations, essentially taking U.S. jobs and implanting them into other countries if the CDC doesn't get moving here. So,
but then, I mean, that's not weird. But Macy's, Gap, Carnival, Lowe's, Restoration Hardware, Simon Property Group, Nordstrom's. These were the guys that were selling off yesterday.
They're doing quite well here. A lot of it is the leisure area of the market that's recovering within consumer discretionary, with a lot of pent up demand that, as we see continuation of our opening of our economy, and we think that we'll continue to see great strength.
Purple is bad. I don't think a Carnival or Wynn or Fastly or Delta are bad. I think there are a lot of great companies in what was sold, but I sold them because I don't have large enough positions in them to where even if they do well, they're not going to move the needle.
At these levels. See, look at ChargePoint though. ChargePoint's done some nice selling off here.
Things, and the firm also increased its price targets on shares of Carnival and Royal Caribbean, again citing pent-up demand there. So another bit higher for those travel names.
Equity report today, particularly on Carnival, but we had to go with those Appleheads. John, sum up the Appleheads right now.
I'll go through them again. Apple committing $430 billion in U.S. investments over the next 5 years, planning to invest over $1 billion in North Carolina. North Carolina investments create at least...
Norwegian Cruise Lines up 5%, Carnival up 3%. Delta Airlines up not quite 1%, but really seeing some movement here over the last few weeks in a lot of these stocks. So here's a trailing 1 month chart of Norwegian back up to these highs right here. And
all right, so
that documentary too many times. Documentary on the Carnival cruise one.
Yeah, and they've just decided nobody should be able to cruise anymore.
Well, I think that was a suboptimal depiction of the industry.
It was.
It's kind of rough, honestly, for the cruise industry. I really do think the cruise industry, I mean, there should be a way to get that to reopen. Even Apple's down 1.5% right now. We're up a tiny little bit. Let's see like indices for a moment here. Let's do like Dow stock. You could usually come across. Carnival working towards plan for possible July restart on U.S. on select chips. Oh, that's cool. I am blown away with some of the things that you could do that I have never even done. I'm now back to 40.57 here. Carnival's up. Neo's up. Neo, folks, Neo was like 31 yesterday. Oh my gosh. And even at 33, it's a bargain today. 3% on Etsy, 4% on Carnival, Social Cap, around American Airlines. Yeah, kind of same behavior. Carnival, pretty much range bound. The mark. We've got Carnival Cruise Lines, 2% Tattooed. Oh, Tattooed went green today. It was. It's so. Here's JP Morgan. Here's Carnival. We got a lot of recovery and financials. Here's Credit Suisse, down today.
What the results say about the state of the consumer. Plus, Carnival CEO Arnold Donald on the cruise line's big jump in booking volumes and the timeline for resuming trips in the U.S.
Is being vaccinated, and the vaccines are amazingly effective.
Carnival Cruise Lines, of course, saying that they're looking for a full fleet to be operating by next spring. When are you looking at full capacity, full fleet? Is it coming later than you might have wanted?
Well, we're already 15 months.
Moving in pre-market trading here in the U.S., Carnival Cruise Lines. It is lower for a second day. The stock fell 7% yesterday, although that did have to do with the announcement of a stock sale of $500 million. Still, though, it is down about 1.5% in pre-market trading. And travel by the
Step. By the way, Carnival, not selling stock. I know what they did. Yeah. They're refinancing 11% coupon.
For the last 5 or 6 weeks, it was a lot of those travel stocks, the Carnival Corps, of course, the United Airlines and the other airline stocks, and a lot of those material companies, including Freeport McMoran. Those names, they've been down by double-digit percentages since the beginning of June here. Carnival down about 4% here in the pre-market, United Airlines down about 3%, and Freeport McMoran down more than 3% here in the pre-market here. So this is a little bit of a rotation going on, a little bit of a
from the highs of March. And it's not just the airlines. Take Carnival Cruises. That stock is down about a quarter from the June highs. These are sectors of this economy that are struggling. This is not where we thought we would be 12 months ago.
Recovery stock, going forward instead of maybe the Carnival Cruises or the airlines, ones that I've made, traditional investments like that previously. How does this one sort of pale in comparison?
Is Royal Caribbean, they're recommending vaccination. Carnival is requiring unvaccinated to buy travel insurance if they're sailing out of Florida. So I guess you're not as liable. The issue is kids. Kids aren't vaccinated. So what do you do with them?
The other issue, of course, is liability.
Yeah.
You get on a... let's not get into it, but liability is a big problem right there.
All right, Fastly. Oh my gosh. Who remembers, say something just after the election. It doesn't matter. Go to Carnival. You literally go to when the election, see the 4th was right here. Election became a little bit more certain around the 6th. Things start taking off. Now, obviously, I know some things started slowing down, like tech started slowing down in February or whatever. But the point was, people are so afraid.
And that's why you didn't see me get in any of these, right? Carnival, I felt like that stock ran way too fast.
Moving to the downside, I wanted to note is Carnival Cruise Lines. A judge knocking down a ruling that was going to ease pandemic restrictions on Florida cruise ships. As a result, Carnival is down about 4% in early hours, Francine. Related restrictions on cruises out of Florida. As a result, Carnival, Norwegian, Royal Caribbean, all some of the big underperformers in early hours this morning, John.
The President of the United States, Tom, a couple of days ago said several days. I think it was several days ago when we might find out what happens with travel. Over in Europe, Kaylee, thank you. EasyJet down by 5.8%, Carnival down by 7.2%.
Are indeed travel stocks. Cruise lines like Carnival and Norwegian each up around 3%. The airlines gaining as well. American up 1.3% and Delta Air.
Did somebody say something? Is this just, oh my gosh, they oversold? Carnival's almost under $20. Let's just buy it up, blah, 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 blah.
How strong the boat is right now. Carnival came to market this week and issued 7-year debt with a 4% coupon. Back in the spring of 2020, that was 11.5%. That is a massive turnaround. Yeah. And that's a company facing some real risk through the summer and beyond, Tom. I'd go one step further.
Recovery stocks moving again. Carnival Cruise Lines here up also 4.5%.
Of a cruise from Carnival Corp. This is their Princess line, which went from Seattle to Alaska and back. And then Norwegian did the same. This was from a trip out of a port in Greece, went around a few of the European islands and back again. These were the first 2 full successful with paying passengers.
stock up about 2.6%. And finally, Carnival Cruise Lines is also moving higher. Its Princess subsidiary completed its first cruise over the weekend successfully since voyages were halted because of the pandemic.
We'll have 36 ships sailing
Carnival
at the end of this month.
What is Royal Caribbean?
No.
You are correct.
Dang it.
They have managed to be able to do now. The stock's down from a very big secondary that they did much higher. But I will say, David, this is a very encouraging sign in terms of the reopening of America.
JetBlue, these guys just rotating down. Hilton, Macy's, Delta Air, Ford, Snowflake, like everything.
Lines under some pressure this morning. Both Norwegian and Carnival down around 1.5% before the bell, Matt.
Positive. Here we go. So, well, this ship was a ship out of luck. Oh, good one. Oh, Carnival Vista cruise ship traveling. Okay. Oh, wow. Here comes all this, the ad spam. Look at how much junk we got around here. This is incredible.
Trading the Norwegian and Carnival Cruise Lines down 2.3 and 1.3% respectively. Delta is in negative territory as well. Delta Airlines.
Doesn't look like positive EPS comes until 2022. Let's see what Carnival shows. This is not as much of a growth story as it is a rebound story, but
look at the percentages here, guys. This is based on the Carnival and Royal Caribbean growth, and it's not a whole lot invested, but look at that. You know, you invest a little bit and it grows to that amount. That's just really taking advantage of the time.
To your point about fast fashion, we get Inditex tomorrow, Zara, and Carnival. So we're cruising tomorrow.
We are cruising tomorrow. Also, that'll be a good outlook for sort of what their visibility is for the next 12 months. The rest of
A little bit of slowdown on that growth on Carnival, but you still got that growth after hitting some lows, getting close to $20 there. The airline's trading relatively sideways. Fisker up 3.22%. Carnival's doing a nice move here, 4.29.
Statistics. They just came out and
in pre-market trading. Another stock moving to the upside is Carnival Cruise Lines. Of course, it reported results on Friday, went pretty well. It actually saw the shares rising for a third day on Friday, and it does look like those gains will continue today. The stock up the better part of 3% in early hours. And finally,
Southwest Airlines. Then we get into Carnival. Delta, Carnival, Expedia.
January to March 2020. In fact, even today in 2021, it's not even back to its pre-pandemic stock price.
Money and actually operate. Remember what like Carnival Cruise Lines had to deal with during the pandemic? They were getting loans of like 13% or something totally ridiculous.
Some of the biggest laggards in pre-market trading as well. Delta Airlines and Carnival Cruise Lines each down about 2.5%.
And it's a great business because people like my wife like do these tarot card things and insist that it's true. So I don't read tarot cards, and I do have a crystal ball in my office, just so when people ask if I have a crystal ball, I say I do. But the crystal ball has produced no returns, like 0%.
173. Still, that's awesome. Norwegian Cruise Lines and Carnival up about a third.
story on the downside to the S&P, you got the likes of Carnival, for example, Kroger, Cisco, as well as Procter & Gamble down by 1.6%.
Every weekend, it's called the Electric Daisy Carnival. And if you can't make it there physically, well, not to worry. You can join it in the metaverse version.
Before the price increases, if you want to lock in the current yearly subscription forever. Let's go to the next stock. The next stock is
boats. But in the case of Royal Caribbean, Norwegian Cruise Lines, and Carnival Cruise Lines, they've all seen a nice uptick as of this last week. In fact, on Friday, a great surge. 9% up on Royal Caribbean, 8% up on Carnival Cruise Line, and 8% up on Norwegian Cruise Line. What's causing this? Should you still invest in cruise line stocks? I'm going to share with you my portfolio, and yes, I'm up 200% on my cruise line stocks. Super excited about that. I don't know when will I sell and what's going on here, but for now.
Beyond Meat, Piton's sitting at 51. Carnival Cruise Lines really has not taken off. If you take a look at the day chart here on Carnival Cruise Lines, oh yeah, lots of Tesla rumors for 12.9 because of Elon's cryptic tweets.
Carnival Corp has ships, whereas Shibu Inu does not. But Shibu Inu has a market cap greater than Carnival Corp. So I think all of these
percent right now, sub 100 trading at 99. Carnival trading on both sides of the Atlantic. The cruise industry front and center, obviously, throughout this entire pandemic in terms of the pain that's been felt. That stock down by 14%. Then you come into the airline sector, and it's interesting, actually. It's definitely the long-haul carriers that are most exposed to this.
I'm looking for the deals, and I mean, short of Carnival at like $18, which I think is a potential opportunity.
Same thing happened, of course, with Carnival Cruise Line. Sharp fall off. And not only that, Delta Airlines and the airline industry as a whole. So they are suffering probably the biggest hits in this overall downturn as of today. But as you can expect, what is going well? Well, the good thing that's going on is that Moderna stock is up significantly. Look.
Strength in actually other stocks like cruise ships, Carnival up 0.5 percentage point, and then you're looking as well at Expedia, which was one of the hardest hit Friday. Compare that with the European session, and we did actually see a sustained rebound throughout Monday's session.
Be up by about 2.3%. The cruise lines up, with Carnival up by 2.8%. Expedia, Marriott, American Airlines all looking higher as well. Joe?
I expect the CDC saying last night that it plans to toughen COVID testing requirements for international travelers coming to the United States. The new order would shorten the timeline.
A big boat, and we're taking on water. Is it time to get lifeboats out? CCL Carnival.
No, it's too early, too early. The one is Norwegian. That's the one that's got the best balance sheet and best situation, and then maybe we can go down to Carnival later. Let's go to Brian in Kentucky. Brian in Kentucky. Brian.
Rough couple of days, Jimmy.
Thank you.
In individual stocks, kind of like what we're seeing over here in Carnival Cruise Lines. I mean, take a look at Carnival just as an example here. Sorry, not Carnival, Snowflake. Snowflake
bound for Washington, but not like this.
I'd say you were a Carnival barker. Except
to Omicron news, sold off on Friday, rebounding today. Carnival, the best performer in the S&P, despite news of 17 COVID cases on a Norwegian ship that disembarked yesterday in Louisiana. Norwegian up 9%, Carnival up around 8%. Sarah and Will.
The Delta surge is what freaked these guys out. Look at that, 1790 on Carnival. It's not bad. I mean, I'm not touching these recovery things because I think the case porn we're going to get is going to be extreme. But look.
Participation would move down.
And he's still talking about.
It just doesn't go away.
Oh, come on. I don't know. All right, next up, Carnival Cruise Lines set to report results before the bell on Monday. The Street expecting a loss of $1.43 on $1.4 billion in rev. The stock has gotten crushed since news of the Omicron variant broke last month. Hey, maybe it takes some courage to jump in when things are bad, but maybe it's the right thing to do.
The wrong thing to do is make fun of Mariah Carey, by the way. So the right thing to do with Carnival is to be tactical going into these numbers. I think, first of all, we forget with COVID stocks that were certainly in the tornado. You make the most money when things go from terrible to just bad, and that was Carnival. That's still up 130%, yet down near the bottom of its range. The key is I don't think they're going to give you the kind of guidance that the market wants in terms of their financial outlook. I do think break even on free cash flow by second or third quarter, but I think longer term, by 23, they will. Some money on the trade, too.
Gina, quick final thought, either on Carnival or Mariah Carey.
Well, I will pass on Mariah Carey, but on Carnival, I think the broad story is that we are going to have to learn how to live with variants. I don't think that that's going away. And as we continue to have testing availability and treatment availability, all of those things are becoming more broadly available. Companies like Carnival will be able to get back to pre-pandemic highs.
All right, let's go finally to AMC. Shares jumping.
It's history. Listen, I think that Norwegian, we're going to hear from Carnival next week. I think Norwegian's going to say, you know what? The order book is terrific. Yes, there's COVID, but there's COVID everywhere. You can cruise. I think Frank Del Rio's terrific. And I am announcing once again, I intend to cruise in 2022.
Week from chip maker Micron.
Complex under pressure. Just one example is Carnival Cruise Lines down 3.4%. And then you were both referring to the Moderna story. Its booster shot looks like it increases protection against the Omicron variant 37-fold. And as a result, you are seeing a bid coming into those shares. So there are some.
I actually think that as we turn to 22 and 23, and as there's less focus
on specific COVID recovery stocks. The XBI, which has been down so much this year, down 18%. What is that? 40% discrepancy to the S&P 500.
Great deal yesterday with Carnival. Will it improve the customer experience? When I look at the cheap tech stocks I own, this comes to the front of the line. So Jabil, I think, go up significantly from here, executing phenomenally well.
Josh, I've been thinking all show. I think I do miss you a little bit. So what's your final trade?
Oh, Melissa. Performing S&P 500 stocks circa 1 p.m. yesterday. Literally. Number one, Carnival Cruise Lines, LOL. And allegedly, the Dow was down 500 points because of the virus. Number two, American Airlines, and then Clorox, and then Kroger. Make it make sense. It doesn't. And so this idea that from one day to the next, oh, today's a virus on day. Oh, no, the next day, look, the staples are selling off. It's a virus.
In terms of the message of the markets yesterday, we saw not only American Airlines and Carnival, but we saw Lyft higher. We saw Staples higher. I mean, it wasn't a clear message. So in terms of stock picking, Jason Snipe, where do you go? Because it's not just about lockdowns. It's about consumer behavior. And if consumers themselves, even if they don't have to shelter in place, even if
this press conference is a bit of a carnival atmosphere. I mean, there are going to be over 500 journalists
complex.
in
Really,
the hall.
Matt, you're seeing weakness. Carnival's down the better part of 3%, and Norwegian Cruise Lines down about 1.6%, Matt.
All right, so there is something going on, but really it's time to take stock, I think, and look forward to see what 2022 is going to bring us in terms of Omicron and the coronavirus, in terms of...
This is no surprise, but we've got Carnival Cruises, which, as you said earlier on, is having a really tough time. I think that actually covers really strong. IB in airports as well. I think now is the time of worst sentiment for airports and probably the best time to get invested.
Yeah, I mean, that brings you out and buy stuff. They still can't get on a Carnival cruise.
Absolutely. And you know what? All the way through this pandemic, we've seen things speed up. We've seen the stimulus have to speed up. We've seen the economic reaction speed up. The virus itself in its waves has sped up. So we've got to this fourth wave now. And if we're lucky and if it works out,
a cruise ship. Now, the latest commentary we got from Carnival CEO Arnold Donald last week was that Omicron so far has only resulted in a small spike in cancellation. So that's one of the reasons we saw cruise stocks outperform last week, with Carnival gaining as much as 13 to 14%. So we'll have to see if that story stays the same going into 2022. One thing I will say, yes, the idea of being quarantined on one of these ships doesn't sound like a great vacation, but
Happy holidays.
But I will say that the cruisers, they are very
what's happening as it relates to demand.
The Carnival Freedom specifically was denied the ability to dock at 2 specific ports and gave passengers a $100 gift voucher, according to one of those passengers who posted the letter from the ship's captain. I'm wondering if you think that that's appropriate compensation, and if not, how
Right now, a Carnival cruise vacation is, probably could be less than $100 a day. So I don't know if you're going to be making money. So, it might actually be, appropriate compensation. And it's not like you don't have tons of activities on board to do.
small percentage of passengers tested positive across multiple lines: Carnival, Royal Caribbean, and Norwegian Cruise Line. Stocks within the cruise lines are trading flat because so far this is different than what we saw back in 2020. Those who tested positive so far are asymptomatic to mild symptoms. The crew and nearly all passengers are fully vaccinated, so this again recommending Americans not to cruise. Carnival, you'll see Royal and Norwegian Cruise Line trading down after starting the day with gains. A space we will continue to watch very closely.
For developers, as we talked about that, Carnival, Norwegian got hit a little bit. Rapid test shortages tied to Fed action. Thanks, Joe Biden.
I think June of next year. Is that going to happen?
Oh, I mean, I think the capacity to be back. I don't.
0.7%. I find this interesting because Carnival pre-market is actually rebounding. So we're seeing, at least for today, a divergence between the two. Now, it might be
these social distance stocks, whether it's Carnival Cruise Lines, recoveries, or whatever. So that one thing has changed from this report. And honestly, I'll just give you the silver lining up front. That's the only thing that's positive in this report. Everything else is bad in this report. The only thing that's positive in the report is basically that Rocket Lab, where are my opportunities? Carnival's back to 22, don't really care. Dave & Buster's almost at $40.
You can go to a carnival, you can go to a music concert, you can go to a museum.
The resistance trying to get back up. I will say Carnival Cruise Lines is one of the few that has stayed above, but it's also started to rotate back to that scaffolding.
Well, look what led. What led was American Airlines and Carnival and the cruises, right? So that's a bit of a reopening tinge. I think that makes more sense broadly than owning these work-from-home names.
Wise words. I don't mess with deal stocks.
Tell me this is not some like institutional trading. This is bull crap. That's what that is. How does
Lucid, Baba, Boeing, PayPal, Carnival Cruise Lines. But overall, I would say, remember these are at their core younger investors that may not have as much experience with the volatility that we're seeing today.
And so how?
A real challenge, especially for a very mass market cruise line like Carnival, is the double vaccination requirement, where, 60% of the population isn't fully vaccinated? Well, that's going to negate a lot of family cruising, especially on a mass market ship like Carnival's brands.
Concern specifically, but the fact you have a sell rating on Carnival, you have hold ratings on some of the other names as well. What is it going to take for you to get bullish again on this industry?
Well, right now, Morgan, after we've sort of seen this reopening bounce, there's two bull cases right now for the cruise lines. One, that the back half of the year.
You also have a lot of the travel complex under pressure. Carnival's down about 2.3%. Some of those more lofty values like Tesla are also lower. And then even oil, we were talking about that story. Oil has been bouncing around. Even ExxonMobil is down about 0.9%. So a broad risk-off day here in the U.S. when it comes to individual names, Danny.
Is doing well overall as we restart, but it will take some time. Our Carnival brand is going to have 3 ships in Alaska. All of the Carnival brand ships they just announced will be sailing by the summer, so we're excited about that. Our other brands are slowly bringing all of their ships back over time, but it'll probably be 23 before we begin to see the opportunity for results like we had in 19, because obviously we've missed things should be looking very bright for the industry and certainly for Carnival Corporation.
Arnold, one for me on the CDC downgrading the risk level. Do people pay attention to that? Does that matter? Because, a few things we've learned since COVID, a good percentage of people are not listening to the medical experts.
Cedar Park or even a Dave & Buster's, Carnival Cruise Lines, these companies are pretty saturated with debt. How do you handle that?
I don't want the high debt ones. So Carnival Cruise Lines, pure cruise lines, I don't want.
Anything or anyone or any entity that has exposure to the region or could be impacted by a global slowdown, particularly those who want to travel, are getting hit and hit hard. All of those issues I mentioned down at least 5%. They have.
Let's take a peek over here. It's worth noting that Carnival is actually under $20 right now.
Carnival, which announced yesterday it is starting to change some of its itineraries to avoid the port of St. Petersburg. Not a lot of people, I guess, want to cruise to Russia at the moment, and especially given all the sanctions going on, it could complicate that situation. Sentiment, Tesla's down 0.8%, Apple by about 0.7 in early hours, Anna.
So that's some of the pre-market movers, Kaylee. Let's get to the European.
Household income, $60,000, $70,000 that goes on a Carnival Cruise Lines. And then secondly, their second biggest component of their cost is going to be fuel. And just as a matter of fact, I would say over the last 3 or 4 days, back of the envelope, I would calculate that a company
That includes the airlines and the cruise lines as well. Carnival is up more than 7 percentage points. And then, as Anna was saying, we are seeing more and more companies joining the list of those pulling out of Russia. PayPal, one of the
great move up for Wynn there. MGM's up 7.7%. Carnival Cruise Line up 8.7%. Royal Caribbean up 5.9%.
Production.
I wanted to hear your thoughts on Carnival Cruise ticket CCL.
If I had to buy one, I'll do Norwegian because I think that Frank Del Rio's done a remarkable job. But at the same time, I got to tell you, at this point, I'd rather own the worst airline than the best cruise line. Let's go to Chris in Florida. Chris.
And a net loss that missed estimates. Still, Carnival says that weekly booking volumes for future sailings have been improving since the middle of January. It's expecting occupancy to return to historical levels in 2023. And Alibaba has ramped up its share buyback to $25 billion. China's e-commerce giant is reacting to staunch a $470 billion loss of value during
numbers a few moments ago. It did post a loss of $1.66. Analysts have been looking for a loss of $1.26. Revenue $2.26 billion was pretty much in line. Right. Tune in for an exclusive with Arnold Donald on Closing Bell this afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern. They do.
Moving higher this morning, cruise lines, specifically Carnival, really leading the way. The company announcing after the bell yesterday it just had its best week of bookings on record. That is the week through April 3rd. So that lifting.
Certainly than what you're going to see at a Carnival. And if you think about both the upside and the downside scenario, I think investors generally feel more comfortable about the outlook for the higher end consumer than certainly the average consumer, much less the lower end consumer.
Sure, but I like your point about how these stocks
earnings power by about 50%.
Wow.
Since prior to the pandemic. That's a combination of increased interest expense as well as added equity. And the number for Norwegian is a little bit higher than that. And so it's going to take a while for them to get back to pre-pandemic earnings power.
Arnold Donald is stepping down as CEO after 9 years on the job. He will become vice chairman. The current COO, Josh Weinstein, will become the new CEO of Carnival, the world's largest cruise line. This comes, of course, amid a tenuous 2 years. And I will say, at the last shareholder meeting, there was some pushback on Carnival CEO Arnold Donald's compensation package in 2021 of $15 million. But of course, he has played a leading role in fighting hard for this industry to recover. And the industry is in recovery mode, with Carnival seeing around 75% of its ships back at sea. They've been moving on pricing and putting a lot out there in terms of marketing to get more customers to book ships. This summer will be the critical season for this industry to really mark this recovery. But big news here. This is the world's largest cruise operator. And
Hyatt Hotels, we own Norwegian Cruise Lines, Carnival Cruise Lines. We own about a basket of 10 of these names. And we just, sort of.
A lot of the travel complex, including the cruise lines. Carnival out last night after the bell saying that it is the first U.S. cruise operator to restart its entire fleet after.
Price targets follow the stock price in black. Carnival Corporation always stock price target above the stock price, then negative things, and then following down, adjusting, and then up as the price goes up and becomes, let's say, investable again. So for me,
it matures in 2024, and it's very similar in the high yield market. So we saw Carnival come last week in the high yield market at 10.5%, but generally companies aren't going to be forced to come to the market to pay up.
AMC, folks, AMC, American Airlines, Carnival Cruise Lines, and these are companies that I've been looking at, but I keep stopping myself from wanting to buy, with the exception of the AMC shares that I do already hold. Because
then you have Carnival Cruise, which, to be fair to Carnival, it's going to take a while to.
Delta Airlines, Apple, even Royal Caribbean, Carnival Cruise Lines, things like that. Even with the dip today, my overall holdings within Stash is still up 17.23%.
Two idiosyncratic things. One, Carnival down by about 7% yet again today. Yesterday, the whole cruise line industry got some downgrades over at Morgan Stanley. We're having some follow-through selling again today. That had been really whippy action around the reopening trades, now firmly to the downside. Flip side.
in the pre-market trading in the United States. Let's start off with Carnival Cruise Lines, because right off the bat, remember, we had that massive sell-off yesterday, so you are seeing a pretty broad rebound. And I love to look at the cruise lines and the airlines as that kind of gauge of not just a broad rebound, but also a little bit of a volatility proxy. We remember, we're not out of the woods. The VIX still over a 30 handle. And when you have that situation, Carnival Cruise Lines, American Airlines, those kind of names tend to actually have these big moves. So Carnival Cruise Lines is one we're going to watch throughout the session, up just shy of 3%. Let's take a look at the tech space, though. TSM, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, the ADRs, let's see here. If you're actually looking at something like Carnival Cruise Lines, I really like to look at this name as like a proxy for this broad rebound. It's not just your tech-heavy names. It's not just your cyclicals that are outperforming. It's across the board.
Carnival,
and that's
which has already been under a tremendous amount of pressure, one of the worst, most emblematic names of the return to the pandemic trade. It's back to April 2020 levels. That was just a few weeks after the CDC's no-sale order. Yes, it's a top 5 performer in the S&P today. It's extremely high.
Bucks or whatever. Royal Caribbean, down to 35, down 11%. Carnival's at $8. These stocks are priced basically around the same price as they were during Rona.
Earnings to watch include FedEx, Accenture, Darden Restaurants, Carnival Corp, and home builder Lennar.
% move. CCL, Carnival, a 12% move. Wynn, 12% move.
Let's go to a completely different sector and talk about Carnival Corporation. Obviously, the cruise lines did the very best they could during the pandemic. They're hanging on by their fingernails.
I expected them to have $20 billion of debt when they finally emerged.
For some other stocks in the move in pre-market trading, I have to point out Carnival Cruise Lines, because an analyst over at Morgan Stanley coming out swinging, slashing his price target by almost half, down to $7 a share. And he actually introduced a bear case in which the stock could literally go to $0. Introducing a bear case of $0, talking about the fact that bookings are a bit weaker and they're facing higher costs, including from fuel. And so all of that is leading to his pretty dire sentiment.
Yeah, well, earlier, Mel, we were talking about Carnival Cruise and just that entire industry. Well, Royal Caribbean's one of the names that hit today as well, and it's actually hit more than once today. But the one I want to focus on is they bought 11,000 of the September 20 puts today for 90 cents in Royal. So looking for a little bit more downside. Stock was trading a little.
Today reiterated underweight at Morgan Stanley, target being cut to $7 from 13. The firm introduced a $0 bear case. It's one of our calls of the day. Pete, you used to own calls in this one. Certainly a tough time for companies in general that have a lot of debt.
Dollars of debt at a high interest rate of 10.5% last month, and also detailed plans to refinance about $2 billion in the next coming months. The company right now has about $7.5 billion in liquidity to service its debt obligations. Cents to shareholders. Now, I just got an update today from my sources that Carnival is still in discussions with the Saudis to sell its Seabourn brand for about $1 billion. However, discussions with the Saudis, I'm told, are moving, quote, notoriously slow. We'll
ratings
see.
On any of them. In fact, a sell rating on Carnival.
Yeah, presumably a much higher refinancing rate for them. Just looking in terms of potential catalysts for this group, what happens if vaccination and COVID testing requirements do get dropped? Is that a positive for cruise stocks, or is that a
Cruise lines in particular, because this week we've talked a lot about Carnival Cruise Lines being under pressure. Remember, cruise lines right now are kind of this volatility play. Royal Caribbean this time, though, actually up 3% in a sea of red. This is your best performing stock this morning, Anna.
Yeah, that after an awful first half for the sector as a whole. One of
In pre-market trading in the U.S., I do want to start with Carnival because it had an absolutely brutal week last week. Remember, there was that big downgrade from Morgan Stanley. The bank's base case for Carnival is $0 per share. We're not quite there yet, but you do have Carnival trading a little bit higher. It is lower in pre-market trading, though. And I do want to also highlight Occidental because we had some late news on Friday that Berkshire Hathaway has boosted its stakes in Occidental Petroleum. Traders seem to like that vote of confidence. Occidental Petroleum higher by 2.7%. And from macro to micro.
These top three represent the vast majority of the industry, and then you have much smaller cruise industry operators that represent, under 20% of the industry. The smaller of the three, for times, it actually was more profitable. So this would suggest that, market share doesn't actually necessarily drive your profitability. And so looking at this business right now, how is Carnival doing? It is still a complete mess. You know, even sort of the height of the pandemic, this business is a complete disaster mode. With something like Carnival, it's very, very speculative. You have to have an opinion on what the consumer is going to do. You have to have an opinion on when they're going to do it. You know, will they be able to finance their continued cash burn in the years ahead?
Below their norm, they recommended as Carnival Cruise Lines, CVS Health, Disney, Norwegian Cruise Lines, and Royal Caribbean. Now, I thought this was quite interesting because I'm a big fan of taking advantage of, even if we have...
That was the right move or not, right? But the government ruined Carnival Cruise Line. That stock would not be $8 today if it was not for the government saying, no, you guys aren't allowed to sail for years and years and years, right?
It's also the cruise lines. Take a look, for example, here. This is Carnival, and you can see the orange bar represents how much these companies have borrowed during the pandemic.
By 2 to 3% as well. And elsewhere in the travel space, Carnival is taking it on the chin this morning after announcing a $1 billion stock offering. It's down almost 11%, and its peers, Royal Caribbean and Norwegian, each down a little more than 5%.
Cross currents here, but the one thing I'd point out, David, is it's a lot of companies that have fantastic businesses like Danaher, China Point Travel Trust, just killing it. You have a fabulous business with great growth, of which there are many. It's been a terrific time.
It has.
About 12.5%.
About every 4 months, don't they do another offering of some kind?
They do, but this $1 billion one could be one of the largest equity.
Whenever a company has to raise capital, particularly one that sold a lot of debt not that long ago, you start to wonder.
So I don't want to use the saying, you don't want to be buying a sinking ship here, but I am not touching this. But in the event you do see an overreaction today, because this is a very expensive capital raise, but they have some 2023 debt maturities that they have to meet. So,
especially after the dips that we've seen over the last couple of days, things like Carnival or Play or Win or Etsy. Although some of these are more, I would say these right here are your risk on. These are more sort of the consumer staying strong or coming back plays.
My question to you is on Carnival Cruise. They just announced a $1 billion stock offering last week, and their stock has dropped over 10% since then. Buy, sell, or hold, Jim?
No, I'm not going to touch a stock that does a big offering at 9 when the stock was at double that just a few months ago. So no, they should have done it when their stock was higher. I say no to Carnival. How about Nashat and Virginia? Nashat.
That they go back to 24 billion all-time highs in revenues in about 2 years seems kind of
not launch a stock sale, which your competitor Carnival did last week?
Yeah, well, I really said, I think, three things about how we're going to manage our capital. First is we're still continue to seek high returning investments that we make. Second, as we are now generating free cash flow and so
that took on a ton of debt. You just look at someone like Carnival Cruises, who just did $1 billion equity raise and still has 6 times net debt to EBITDA. And if you go by what Royal Caribbean said this week, demand's not there. That is a problem. So no, the shorts are very, very company specific. It's more company specific than a macro view.
Queen of the metaverse, Paris Hilton built her own world inside Roblox, where her avatar DJs, headlining.
Look at is Norwegian. Now, let me pull something up. This is from Carnival's website, but it really is across the whole industry. This is something that was very, very important. The CDC got rid of these protocols that were going on ships. This is really what hit cruise lines a great deal. So now that they have kind of control of their own future, the CDC has said, okay, it's safe for you guys this one, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Carnival is recovering a little bit faster as far as getting people's butts back on boats.
Carnival barker of an executive, in our opinion, who has really kept it there. One thing he's done is just been so completely accessible to his retail investors.
This is why Royal Caribbean Group announced closing of $1.25 billion senior unsecured notes offering.
Following the new launch of a new ship. In comparison to Royal and Carnival, you would still pick Norwegian, or is there a better buy within this space?
I think Norwegian's fine at this point in time. A lot of those names look the same. There's been tremendous amounts of adding of debt to the balance sheet to keep these companies afloat.
Love value. What do you make of the chances of CCL Carnival being able to service its debt and stave off bankruptcy without having to sell?
I think it can stave off bankruptcy, but I don't think that makes it a good stock, and that's the problem. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the conclusion of the Lightning Round.
Will be reporting earnings as well. Okay, lastly, let's talk
Cruise Line Holdings. This one's worth drilling down on because chief rival Carnival reported a terrible set of numbers this morning, and it crushed Norwegian along with the whole group of people who are liking travel and services. Well, maybe that's coming to an end. I'm betting Norwegian has better things to say than Carnival, but who knows? Carnival stock today was absolutely disconcerting. Finally, odd one. On Friday, we hear from Tilray.
And then you got Carnival. I mean, at what point do we really stand up and say we may have a bigger problem than we thought with
Jim Morotra, he's not saying that the bottom's here. Carnival Cruise not saying the bottom's here. John Donahoe and Nike's not saying the bottom's here. You want to anticipate? You want to anticipate the bearishness, the tactical bearishness?
But they're talking economy, aren't they? I mean, market's going to bottom way.
They're talking. They don't know.
Well, all right, but
what's going on with the Norwegian Cruise Line trade is that Carnival Cruises came out, they missed their earnings expectations.
Is exactly what companies like Nike and Carnival Cruise Lines felt today.
Actually a friend did text me about Carnival Cruise Line today, and I was, telling him, hey, the thing with Carnival, things have deteriorated so massively from where that company used to be. I used to own Carnival prior to Rona. And then once Rona happened, that changed everything for that stock. And I was like, I'm done with that whole situation because...
Okay, how many Targets and Walmarts and Nikes and FedExes and Carnivals do we need before we say, Houston, we have a problem?
It's the wrong kind of volatility. Was this the right kind of vol?
Super important. This is only till the third quarter. Things got so much worse since then. The tone I heard from bankers at the top of the house, end of summer, was pretty sanguine. Now it is a little frenetic, exhausted. They're working late at the top of the house everywhere.
We're down by 2% in early trading.
And through the roof. It's the poor companies like Carnival Cruise Lines that are getting screwed.
It's special enough for you? It was super special, but I just couldn't take it anymore. So Carnival offering yield of up to 11.5% on $1.25 billion of junk bonds. And to me, this is shocking and exactly to what Jerome was talking about, that basically you can get yield in a way that perhaps you couldn't as long as they don't go out of business. But it's a question of...
I am doing well. How about you?
Good. I want your opinion on Carnival Cruise Lines.
I don't like Carnival. I prefer Norwegian Cruise, better balance sheet, and I think it's going to do better even if the economy goes into a real tailspin. Let's go to Dave in Ohio. Dave.
Not too long ago at about 5%.
Beautiful.
And the travel stocks for Carnival, Caesars, all of these up higher. And this was despite, remember at the beginning of the session we were talking about Wynn?
Yeah.
And it had lower it came in below expectations for earnings per share specifically. But Wynn actually proved some strength in properties, and that, I believe, kind of kicked people off,
Other movers in the space, I was looking at Carnival Cruise Lines. That's up 15%. A lot of these charts are going to look the same. Almost doesn't matter what industry. Yes, it's down 48%, but trying to base here.
Not buying it anyhow. So it's kind of like this layer. Like, okay, it's the first
time. So take that resistance level off, that $10 mark for Carnival Cruise Lines, CCL. That's why I'm looking to accumulate call options. Call options only. I'm looking to take that up to about 13, but we need that pull down now. Is very overextended.
Acquisition of Swedish Match. And Carnival hit some rough seas this week after it priced a $1 billion convertible senior note offering. One of its bonds at one point was the biggest loser in junk secondary trading. Sticking with credit, JP Morgan's Oksana Aronov weighed in on the big post-CPI rush into junk.
A lot of things for that company. Carnival Cruise Lines is another good example of a type of company who's now in the zombie category, or some of the meme stocks, AMC or GameStop. So these are really household names.
On the move.
Carnival shares rallied by 4.5% after it said that its Cyber Monday sales were 50% higher than in 2019, which was the last year unaffected by the COVID-19 pandemic.
It was a record day for Carnival as well. Carnival said its Cyber Monday bookings this year were double that of 2019 booking levels. Customers were lured in by deals like 40% off cruise rates and onboard credits. Demand apparently was strong across the entire fleet, according to Carnival, but they specifically pointed out activity for its ships that depart here from New York and Norfolk. Of course, we saw Carnival absolutely tank in late September after it reported a wider than expected quarterly loss and really disappointing Q4 numbers. It has said that it was seeing a meaningful improvement in booking volumes, and they're now running ahead of 2019 levels, so this will only help.
So, you know, we wait and we watch, and the cruise lines continue to just kind of float around. Appreciate it.